Kemet, Kush, and Carthage stand as monumental pillars of Africa's great civilizations, each leaving behind an extraordinary legacy that shaped not only the continent, but also the wider world. These civilizations thrived in different regions and times, each with unique systems of governance, trade, warfare, and cultural development that influenced the course of human history. To understand them is to recognize Africa's central role in the story of civilization itself. Kemet, more commonly known today as ancient Egypt, emerged along the fertile banks of the Nile River. The very name Kemet means the Black Land, a reference to the rich, dark soil that the Nile's annual flooding deposited across the valley. This environment allowed agriculture to flourish in a way that supported stable settlements and the rise of a complex society. As early as 310–100 BCE, the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under the legendary ruler Nama, also called Menes, marked the beginning of a centralized state that endured for millennia. What set Kemet apart was its ability to harness geography, technology, and human ingenuity into a long-lasting civilization. The Nile served not only as a source of water, but also as a transportation highway, connecting people and resources across hundreds of miles. The desert surrounding the Nile Valley offered protection from constant invasions, allowing Kemet to grow with relative stability. From this secure foundation, Egyptians developed remarkable achievements in architecture, engineering, art, mathematics, and writing. The invention of hieroglyphics provided one of the earliest systems of recorded language, allowing history, trade records, and state decrees to be preserved for generations. Monumental constructions, such as the pyramids of Giza and the temples at Karnak and Luxor, continue to inspire awe for their scale and precision, showing a mastery of organization and craftsmanship unmatched in much of the ancient world. Government in Kemet was highly centralized, with pharaohs ruling as both political leaders and embodiments of state power. Their authority extended over vast bureaucracies that coordinated agriculture, taxation, construction projects, and military campaigns. This level of organization allowed Kemet to mobilize enormous resources for building and defense. Beyond power, Kemet was also a hub of knowledge. Advances in medicine, astronomy, and irrigation techniques spread from the Nile Valley into other regions. Contact with neighboring societies, including Nubia to the south and the Levant to the east, enriched Egypt, while simultaneously influencing others. Kemet became both a beacon of African innovation and a bridge to other parts of the ancient world. To the south of Egypt lay Kush, a civilization centered in Nubia, in present-day Sudan. Kush and Egypt were closely connected, often through trade, cultural exchange, and at times rivalry and conflict. Kush emerged as a powerful kingdom around 2000 BCE, developing its own distinct identity, while also drawing inspiration from its northern neighbor. Gold mines, ivory, ebony, and other resources gave Kush wealth and influence, making it a critical hub in long-distance trade networks that stretched across Africa and into the Mediterranean and Middle East. One of the most remarkable aspects of Kushite history was its ability to thrive independently, even in the shadow of Egypt. At various times, Kush was conquered or influenced by Egypt, but it also rose to challenge Egyptian dominance. The period known as the 25th dynasty, when Kushite kings, such as Piye and Taharqa, ruled Egypt as pharaohs, demonstrates the reach of Nubian power. These rulers revitalized Egyptian traditions while blending them with Nubian practices, creating a fusion of cultures that broadened the legacy of both lands. The capital cities of Kush, Kerma, Napata, and later Meroe, each reflected the sophistication of this African kingdom. Meroe in particular became famous for its ironworking industries, earning it the nickname, the Birmingham of Africa, from modern historians. The production and use of iron tools and weapons gave Kush an advantage in agriculture and warfare, setting it apart from many other ancient societies. Kush also developed its own writing system, Meroitic script, which remains only partially deciphered today, but demonstrates the kingdom's intellectual achievement. Kush was also a center of monumental architecture, constructing temples, palaces, and pyramids that rivaled those of Egypt, though built in distinct Nubian style. The pyramids at Meroe, smaller but more numerous than those at Giza, still stand as testimony to the kingdom's cultural and architectural creativity. Despite eventual decline due to external pressures and changing trade routes, the memory of Kush remains vital in understanding Africa's role in shaping ancient civilizations. While Kemet and Kush thrived along the Nile, Carthage rose on the coast of North Africa, in present-day Tunisia. Founded around the 9th century BCE, Carthage began as a Phoenician colony, but soon developed into one of the most powerful city-states of the Mediterranean world. Its strategic position along maritime trade routes allowed it to dominate commerce across the Mediterranean Sea, linking Africa with Europe and the Near East. Carthage became synonymous with seafaring excellence, commercial wealth, and political influence. Carthaginian society revolved around trade and naval power. Its merchants and sailors established trading posts and settlements as far west as Spain and as far south as West Africa, dealing in metals, textiles, agricultural goods, and exotic products. This expansion gave Carthage an extensive sphere of influence that rivaled even the great empires of the ancient world. Its political structure was highly organized, with elected magistrates, councils, and assemblies that coordinated both commerce and defense. Unlike the centralized rule of pharaohs in Kemet, Carthage operated more like a republic, with shared power among its elite ruling family. Perhaps most famously, Carthage is remembered for its rivalry with Rome in the Punic Wars. These conflicts, spanning from the 3rd to the 2nd centuries BCE, were some of the largest and most consequential wars of the ancient world. The Carthaginian general Hannibal became legendary for his bold strategies, including leading an army and war elephants across the Alps to strike at Rome. Although ultimately defeated, Hannibal's campaigns remain among the greatest military feats in history. The destruction of Carthage by Rome in 1406 BCE ended its political independence, but not its legacy. Even in defeat, Carthage contributed significantly to the cultural and economic life of the Mediterranean. Its maritime skills, trade networks, and innovations in agriculture, such as advanced farming techniques and crop management, influenced later societies. What unites Kemet, Kush, and Carthage is their demonstration of Africa's deep contributions to human civilization. Too often, narratives of world history have marginalized Africa's role, yet these civilizations clearly show that the continent was a cradle of innovation, power, and culture. Each of these societies was deeply interconnected with others, shaping and being shaped by the global currents of their time. Kemet gave the world lasting symbols of monumental architecture and administrative sophistication. Kush showed the resilience and creativity of African societies that thrived in complex environments and influenced their neighbors. Carthage demonstrated Africa's role as a center of maritime power, trade, and strategic innovation in the broader Mediterranean. Together, these civilizations dispel outdated notions of Africa as isolated or passive in history. Instead, they reveal a continent that was dynamic, influential, and central to the human story. Studying these civilizations also highlights the importance of geography, resources, and human adaptability. The Nile provided the foundation for Kemet and Kush, while the Mediterranean Sea became the lifeline of Carthage. In each case, African peoples maximized their natural environments to build systems that sustained millions of lives and influenced generations. These stories also remind us of the cycles of history: rise, flourishing, and decline, showing how civilizations adapt, expand, and eventually transform under pressure from both within and without. Even in decline, the legacies of Kemet, Kush, and Carthage endure. Egyptian art, architecture, and scientific knowledge influenced Greek and Roman traditions, which in turn shaped Europe and beyond. The memory of Kush as a kingdom of warriors, ironworkers, and builders speaks to Africa's enduring spirit of resilience and creativity. Carthage's maritime legacy lives on in the history of trade and navigation, reminding us of Africa's place in global exchange. Ultimately, the stories of Kemet, Kush, and Carthage are not just African stories, they are human stories. They remind us that civilization is not the product of one region or one people, but the shared heritage of humanity. Recognizing Africa's role in this heritage gives us a fuller, more accurate understanding of where we come from and how interconnected the ancient world truly was. In doing so, we honor the memory of these great civilizations and ensure that their contributions are never forgotten. The geography and resources of Africa played a central role in shaping the rise and sustainability of Kemet, Kush, and Carthage, and when examined closely, it becomes clear that without these natural foundations, the civilizations could not have thrived in the way that they did. The land, the rivers, the seas and the minerals provided the stage upon which human ingenuity and ambition could perform, and it is no coincidence that each of these civilizations developed in areas where geography offered both opportunity and challenge. The story of their rise is inseparable from the environment they inhabited, and the careful use and management of natural resources became the key to their power and endurance. Kemet, which later became known to the wider world as ancient Egypt, was born on the banks of the Nile River. The Nile was more than a river, it was the very lifeline of the civilization. Every year the river flooded its banks, depositing rich, dark silt onto the surrounding fields. This fertile soil was so vital that the people called their land Kemet, or the Black Land, a reference to the dark earth that contrasted with the barren desert on either side. This annual cycle allowed farmers to grow abundant crops of wheat, barley, flax and vegetables, sustaining a large population and supporting urban centers, craftspeople, administrators and rulers. Without the Nile's dependable floods, Kemet would have remained an isolated desert, rather than one of the world's most enduring civilizations. The river also served as a natural highway, linking Upper and Lower Egypt and enabling the movement of goods, armies and ideas across hundreds of miles. It created unity and connection in a land that otherwise might have been fragmented. In addition to agriculture, the Nile supplied fish and waterfowl, while the surrounding deserts contained gold mines, stone quarries, and semi-precious gems that provided the materials for temples, tombs, and luxury goods. Kemet's geography therefore gave it both nourishment and wealth, positioning it to flourish for thousands of years. To the south of Kemet lay Kush, another civilization whose story was deeply tied to geography and resource. Situated in Nubia, in what is now Sudan, Kush occupied a region where the Nile flowed through rocky terrain and narrow valleys, making it both a fertile area and a natural crossroads for trade. Kush benefited from the same annual flooding that enriched Kemet, but it also had access to resources that Egypt did not. Gold mines dotted the Nubian desert, producing large quantities of the precious metal that became central to the kingdom's wealth and to its trade with neighboring regions. Kush was also rich in ivory, ebony, ostrich feathers, and exotic animals, all highly valued in the ancient world. These goods made Kush a vital partner in long-distance trade networks that extended from Central Africa to the Mediterranean and beyond. Geography also contributed to Kush's military and cultural development. The cataracts of the Nile acted as natural defenses, while the surrounding deserts shielded the kingdom from constant invasion. The capital cities, first Kerma, then Napata, and finally Meroe, were carefully positioned to maximize access to resources and trade. Meroe in particular became renowned for its iron production, which was made possible by nearby deposits of iron ore and the abundant forests that supplied charcoal for smelting. This combination of natural resources enabled Kush to thrive as a manufacturing and trading power, distinct yet connected to its northern neighbor. Carthage, on the other hand, owed its power and longevity to its strategic position on the coast of North Africa, in present-day Tunisia. Founded by Phoenician settlers, Carthage sat on a promontory with an excellent natural harbor that opened directly onto the Mediterranean Sea. From this location, Carthaginian sailors and traders could dominate maritime routes that linked Africa, Europe, and the Near East. Geography gave Carthage both opportunity and vulnerability. The sea was its greatest resource, allowing it to develop into a hub of commerce and naval power, but it also placed Carthage into constant contact and often conflict with other Mediterranean powers. The Carthaginians became master seafarers, establishing colonies and trading posts as far west as the Iberian Peninsula and as far south as the coast of West Africa. They transported metals such as silver, tin, and copper, along with agricultural goods, textiles, and exotic items from Africa. This maritime empire rested firmly on the geographic advantage of a city that was both defensible and ideally placed for Mediterranean trade. Agriculture also played a key role in Carthage's success, for the surrounding lands of North Africa were exceptionally fertile. The Carthaginians became skilled farmers, using advanced techniques such as irrigation, crop rotation, and the cultivation of olives, grapes, and grain. These agricultural innovations not only fed their growing population, but also produced surpluses for trade. The land itself, combined with their knowledge of farming, gave Carthage an economic foundation that was as strong as its naval and commercial power. Geography also influenced Carthage's military strategy. Its harbors allowed the construction of massive fleets, while its location enabled it to control sea lanes and project power across the Mediterranean. Without the unique advantages of its position and resources, Carthage could never have risen to rival Rome itself. When comparing Kemet, Kush, and Carthage, the unifying theme is how geography provided both challenges and opportunities that each civilization adapted to with remarkable ingenuity. Kemet relied on the predictable rhythm of the Nile to sustain agriculture and unify its people, creating stability that lasted for millennia. Kush used its access to gold, ivory, and iron to build a wealthy and resilient kingdom that could withstand and even conquer its more powerful northern neighbor. Carthage turned its harbor and fertile hinterland into the foundation of a maritime empire that shaped the destiny of the Mediterranean world. Each civilization shows that the environment was not simply a backdrop, but a vital partner in human development, shaping economies, politics, and cultures in profound ways. These civilizations also demonstrate how the use of resources determined both prosperity and longevity. Kemet's careful management of water and agriculture allowed it to support large populations and monumental construction. Kush's mastery of ironworking and control of trade routes gave it resilience even when Egypt declined. Carthage's ability to harness the sea and the land for trade and agriculture made it one of the richest states of the ancient world. Yet geography could also bring challenges. Changes in the Nile's flooding cycles sometimes brought famine to Egypt. Kush eventually suffered from deforestation and overuse of resources around Meroe. Carthage, despite its wealth, was vulnerable to rival powers who could exploit its reliance on trade routes. Geography provided the foundations, but human choices determined whether those advantages could be sustained. In the end, the story of Kemet, Kush, and Carthage shows that Africa's geography was never a barrier to civilization, but rather a source of immense opportunity. The fertile soil of the Nile Valley, the mineral wealth of Nubia, and the strategic harbors of North Africa each gave rise to societies that influenced the wider world. These civilizations were not isolated or peripheral, but central to the networks of trade, knowledge, and power that defined the ancient era. Their ability to adapt to and exploit their environments ensured their place in history, and their legacies remind us that geography and resources are among the most powerful forces in shaping the destinies of human society. Innovation and cultural achievements form the heart of the greatness of Kemet, Kush, and Carthage, for these civilizations were not only defined by their political power or military strength, but also by their ability to create, invent, and pass on knowledge that would shape human history. They thrived because they looked beyond survival and sought to organize society, refine technology, and create works of beauty and utility that lasted well beyond their time. In Kemet, the people developed a system of writing that was unlike anything the world had seen before. Hieroglyphics, a complex script of symbols, pictures, and phonetic signs, allowed them to record every aspect of their lives, from tax documents to royal decrees, from medical treatises to hymns. Their writing became the backbone of administration, literature, and cultural continuity. The ability to write meant that generations could share knowledge, refine it, and preserve it across centuries. The scribes of Kemet were not merely record keepers, but guardians of a culture that valued literacy as a form of power. Without writing, the memory of kings, achievements of builders, and discoveries of physicians would have been lost. Yet, because of hieroglyphics, their voices still echo across time. Architecture and engineering were among Kemet's most remarkable contributions to human civilization. The pyramids of Giza, built with millions of stone blocks, remain one of the most astonishing achievements in history. These monuments were not only tombs for kings, but symbols of order, stability, and the ability of a society to mobilize enormous resources for a common goal. Beyond the pyramids, temples, such as those at Karnak and Luxor, displayed artistic grandeur, mathematical precision, and mastery of stonework. Innovations in quarrying, transportation of massive blocks, and alignment of structures with astronomical bodies show a deep understanding of both practical engineering and cosmic order. These buildings were designed not just for their own age, but to last forever, and in many ways, they succeeded. Kemet's achievements extended into science and medicine. Physicians practiced surgery, set broken bones, and treated diseases with remedies drawn from plants and minerals. Their medical papyri show a methodical approach to diagnosis and treatment, making them pioneers in rational medical practice. Mathematicians developed systems of calculation to measure land, calculate taxes, and design monumental buildings. Astronomers charted the movement of stars and planets, which not only guided agriculture, but also inspired later civilizations in their study of the heavens. All of this was possible because the people of Kemet invested in learning, observation, and experimentation, creating a body of knowledge that was shared and transmitted beyond their border. Kush, though influenced by its northern neighbor, developed its own unique innovations and cultural achievements that made it distinct. The kingdom was one of the earliest in Africa to specialize in iron production on a large scale. At Meroe, furnaces turned out iron tools and weapons in vast quantities, so much so that the city became known to later historians as the Birmingham of Africa. This mastery of iron technology gave Kush an advantage in agriculture, as stronger tools allowed farmers to cultivate more land, and in warfare, as iron weapons proved more durable than bronze. Ironworking required not only access to ore, but also mastery of smelting techniques, fuel supply, and organization of labor, showing that Kush had reached a high level of technological development. Kushite builders also left behind a legacy of distinctive pyramids and temples. Unlike the massive pyramids of Giza, the Nubian pyramids at Meroe and Napata were smaller but more numerous, their sharp angles and clustered arrangements creating a unique architectural landscape. These structures reveal both continuity with Egyptian traditions and the assertion of a uniquely Kushite style. Artistic achievements also flourished, with Kushite craftsmen producing jewelry, pottery, and carvings that blended African themes with Egyptian influence. In sculpture and reliefs, Kushite rulers depicted themselves with powerful physiques and regal bearing, emphasizing their strength and authority. These artistic forms reinforced a strong cultural identity that endured even when Kush came under foreign pressure. Perhaps one of the most intriguing innovations of Kush was its creation of the Meroite script. While the script is still not fully deciphered, its existence demonstrates that Kush developed its own writing system, independent of Egypt. This was not a mere imitation, but an innovation that reflected the kingdom's intellectual maturity and cultural pride. The fact that a unique script was necessary shows that Kush saw itself as more than just an extension of Egypt, but as a civilization with its own voice, one that needed to be expressed in writing. Language and script are at the heart of culture, and Meroitic writing remains one of the enduring symbols of Kushite achievement. Carthage, situated in North Africa, became a beacon of innovation in areas that were different from those of Kemet and Kush. Its greatest achievements lay in naval technology, trade networks, and agriculture. Carthaginian shipbuilders were among the most advanced of the ancient world. Their vessels were swift, durable, and capable of long voyages across the Mediterranean. They developed specialized ships for war and commerce, ensuring that their fleets could outmaneuver rivals and dominate trade routes. Carthage's harbor itself was an engineering marvel, with a circular military dock, capable of holding over 200 ships, each ready for deployment. This infrastructure showed not only technological brilliance, but also organizational sophistication, as maintaining such a fleet required constant resources and coordination. Carthaginian achievements in trade extended far beyond the Mediterranean. Merchants traveled westward along the Atlantic coast of Africa, establishing contact with distant peoples and bringing back gold, ivory, and exotic goods. In the other direction, they reached as far as the British Isles in search of tin, essential for making bronze. Their far-reaching networks linked Africa, Europe, and the Middle East, turning Carthage into a cosmopolitan hub where cultures and goods met. The innovations of Carthage in commerce were not only in travel, but also in systems of finance and contract, which allowed merchants to operate with efficiency across vast distances. Agriculture was another area where Carthage excelled. The surrounding lands of North Africa were rich, and Carthaginian farmers developed techniques to maximize their potential. They practiced irrigation, crop rotation, and the cultivation of diverse crops such as olives, figs, grapes, and syrup. A famous Carthaginian agronomist named Mago wrote extensive treatises on farming, which became so valued that after the destruction of Carthage, the Romans preserved and translated them into Latin and Greek. These agricultural methods spread and influenced farming practices for centuries, showing that Carthage's contribution was not limited to seafaring, but also extended to the very sustenance of human societies. Cultural achievements in Carthage were equally significant. The city developed a vibrant art and architecture with richly decorated homes, mosaics, and public spaces. Its society was known for its complexity, blending Phoenician traditions with African influences to create a unique cultural identity. The ruling councils and assemblies that governed Carthage represented a form of political innovation as well, showing how African civilizations could develop republican systems distinct from monarchies or empires. When viewed together, the innovations and cultural achievements of Kemet, Kush, and Carthage reveal Africa as a continent of creativity and progress. These civilizations pioneered systems of writing, developed new technologies in agriculture and metallurgy, mastered architecture and engineering, and advanced the arts of navigation and trade. Their contributions did not vanish with their decline but lived on, influencing later civilizations and forming part of humanity's collective heritage. They were not imitators of others, but originators in their own right, proving that Africa was central to the development of culture and knowledge in the ancient world. Power, politics, and expansion were the lifeblood of the great civilizations of Kemet, Kush, and Carthage, for without strong political systems and the will to expand influence, no society could have grown beyond its local boundaries. Each of these civilizations developed a political model that reflected its environment, its resources, and its people, and each model proved strong enough to sustain power over centuries, while also adapting to constant challenges. In Kemet, power was centered in the figure of the pharaoh, who stood as the embodiment of the state. The pharaoh was not only a ruler in a political sense, but also the supreme authority over law, order, and administration. This centralized leadership allowed for remarkable stability, for under one strong figure, armies could be raised, resources mobilized, and enormous projects constructed. The pharaoh's court contained a vast bureaucracy of officials, scribes, tax collectors, and overseers who managed every detail of governance. Grain harvests were measured, taxes were collected, and labor was organized with precision, ensuring that the kingdom did not collapse under the weight of its size. This bureaucracy was one of the first of its kind in world history, proving that African states were pioneers in the art of centralized government. The power of the pharaoh was also visible in expansionist campaigns. When Kemet sought to control trade routes, protect borders, or secure resources, armies marched under the command of generals appointed by the king. Conquests brought new wealth in the form of tribute and trade, and Egypt's frontiers expanded into the Levant and deep into Nubia. Expansion was not only military, but also cultural, for Egyptian influence extended through art, language, and administration, shaping neighboring peoples for generations. Kush, though often influenced by Egypt, demonstrated its own unique political strength and ability to expand. Early Kushite rulers established centralized kingship at Kerma, creating one of Africa's first great kingdoms. Later, at Napata and Meroe, the kings of Kush built systems of governance that reflected both tradition and innovation. Unlike the pharaohs of Egypt, Kushite rulers often shared power with a strong queen mother, or Kandake, showing a distinctive political balance that gave women a central role in governance. This system demonstrated flexibility and inclusiveness, which helped the kingdom endure through changing circumstances. Kushite kings not only ruled their homeland, but also, during the height of their power, expanded northward to control Egypt itself. This remarkable achievement during the 25th dynasty placed Nubian kings on the Egyptian throne, where they were recognized as pharaohs. Leaders like Paye and Taharqa commanded armies that subdued Egyptian rulers and united the Nile Valley under Nubian authority. This was not a short-lived conquest, but a powerful dynasty that left its mark on Egyptian culture, reviving traditions and restoring monuments while blending them with Nubian practices. The political expansion of Kush showed that African states were not passive neighbors, but active powers capable of projecting influence far beyond their original borders. The governance of Kush was also tied to its ability to manage resources and labor for expansion. Meroe, with its iron industry and fertile lands, required a strong administrative apparatus to control production, oversee trade, and protect borders. The kings and queens of Kush organized military campaigns, not only in Egypt, but also in surrounding regions, defending their frontiers from nomadic incursions and asserting control over trade routes that connected the African interior to the Mediterranean. Expansion was not only territorial, but also economic, for Kush became a gateway between sub-Saharan Africa and northern states, a role that required both political stability and military readiness. The ability of Kush to endure for centuries, even in the face of foreign rivals, testifies to the strength of its political system and the will of its rulers to defend and expand their power. Carthage, unlike Kemet and Kush, did not rely on a single monarch or dynasty, but developed a republican style of governance that reflected its mercantile and maritime character. Power in Carthage was shared among magistrates, councils, and assemblies, creating a balance between the city's leading families and elected officials. The suffetes, often compared to consuls in Rome, were chief magistrates who oversaw civil administration, while a council of elders advised on important matters. Citizens could take part in assemblies, making Carthage one of the most politically diverse systems of the ancient African world. This system allowed Carthage to adapt quickly to challenges, for no single individual controlled all authority. Instead, decision-making was collective, reflecting the needs of a city built on trade, negotiation, and compromise. Carthage's political system was closely tied to its expansion across the Mediterranean. From its harbors sailed fleets that established colonies in Spain, Sardinia, Corsica, Sicily, and North Africa. These colonies were not merely trading outposts, but also extensions of Carthage's influence, serving as bases for resource extraction, markets for goods, and defensive positions against rivals. The Carthaginian navy was the most powerful of its time, and its admirals reported to councils that coordinated both war and commerce. The ability to project power across seas gave Carthage a vast maritime empire, unmatched in the region until challenged by Rome. Expansion was not only political, but also economic, as Carthaginian merchants and settlers spread their culture, laws, and practices across distant lands. The rivalry with Rome demonstrated the strength and weakness of Carthage's political system. Hannibal Barca, the brilliant general who led Carthaginian armies across the Alps, was a product of Carthage's military and political culture. His campaigns shook the foundations of Roman power, proving that Carthage could expand not only across seas, but deep into Europe. Yet internal divisions within Carthage's councils sometimes limited the support Hannibal received, showing the challenges of shared governance in times of crisis. Despite its eventual defeat, Carthage's republican system left a legacy of political organization that influenced later states, proving that African societies could develop complex and participatory forms of governance, distinct from monarchy. Taken together, the stories of Kemet, Kush, and Carthage reveal the diversity of African political models. Kemet built its strength on centralized monarchy and bureaucracy, projecting power through pharaohs who embodied the state itself. Kush combined kingship with unique traditions, such as the role of powerful queen mothers, expanding its rule from Nubia into Egypt, and creating a blended dynasty that shaped the Nile Valley. Carthage forged a republic where councils and magistrates coordinated the rule of a maritime empire that stretched across sea. Each system was adapted to the needs of its people, geography, and resources, and each proved effective in allowing these civilizations to expand, survive, and leave their mark on history. The expansion of these civilizations was never only military. It was also cultural, economic, and intellectual. Kemet expanded its influence through the spread of writing, art, and architecture that inspired neighboring people. Kush expanded through its role as a bridge between sub-Saharan Africa and the Mediterranean, controlling trade and spreading its iron technology. Carthage expanded through commerce, navigation, and the founding of colonies that carried African influence to distant shores. Power and politics provided the framework, but expansion ensured that their legacies reached far beyond their own borders. In the end, the power and politics of Kemet, Kush, and Carthage remind us that Africa was not a land of isolated tribes, but of organized states, powerful rulers, and innovative governments. Their expansion proves that African civilizations shaped their own destinies and influenced the wider world. Their political models show that there is no single way to organize human society, for Africa itself offered monarchy, shared kingship, and republican councils, each effective in its own context. Through power, politics, and expansion, these civilizations carved their place in the story of humanity, demonstrating that Africa's contributions to governance and empire were as rich and complex as those of any other part of the ancient world.